Leftover Lasagne.
Leftover lasagna.
Lasagna? No way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover Lasagna is a
podcast
hosted
by
by
my
Nitin
church
Sundar and Tony Uncle. Leftover Lasagna.
Very funny name.
Hello and welcome to Leftover Lasagna, episode 15. In a week in which, after 14 years, Britain has discovered love of labor, we move into the 15th edition of our Labor of Love. This is the weekly-ish podcast with two friends who prove that a presidential debate is more watchable than a presidential debate. I am blow my own trump, Tony, the guy who likes to pompously proclaim he's great at making bets and deals. And joining me is my co-host who frequently forgets what bets he's made and ends up contradicting himself often. I will bide in my time to take him down. Please welcome the man who contains multitudes that don't talk to each other. Nitin, Joe Biden, Sundar.
Sorry, am I supposed to give a very blank look and keep smiling into the distance since you introduced me as Biden? I need to go.
Oh, man.
Yeah. That's me pulling off for Biden. Thanks for the lovely intro as always, Tony. Well prepared to the hilt. Like, amazing how we started recording and you have a intro that you can just reel off like that without taking 10 minutes to prepare. Yeah.
But today's episode, Nitin, is about broadly around bets, right? And I think this is a point of difference between you and me over a longish period of time. In fact, and you suggested this topic, so why don't we start with you? Why do you suggest the topic?
Sure. In fact, I don't even know if it's a point of difference because, so the context for me selecting this topic is that Tony prides himself in thinking in bets and has said this many times in a common WhatsApp group that Tony and me are a part of. And Tony also looks down upon people who don't think in bets or don't put their money where their mouth is. I famously am not someone who puts my money where my mouth is. I put mics where my mouth is because I do podcasts. So every time we have a heated WhatsApp debate that ends with Tony saying, put your money where your mouth is, I come back and say, okay, we need to actually discuss what exactly you mean by this because I have no idea what it means. I don't know how to react to it. Like I don't know how to refute it or combat it or whatever. So we decided, why don't we actually discuss this as one of the episodes of Leftover Lasagna so that we can get a very unique peek into Tony's mind. We do that all the time, but this is an aspect of Tony's mind that even I have not unraveled so far. So dear listener, along with me, you shall also be regaled today by knowing what exactly Tony means when he says that you should be thinking in bets. Yeah, the floor is yours, Tony. Give us a quick intro and lead us in.
This is so much pressure, right? Because it's not any kind of original thinking at all. It is just basically, to be honest, it is an extension of behavioral economics, right? And the one thing that I regret that I never sort of got into in probably like till B school is economics itself, right?
This is the difference between you and me, right? You regret the fact that you did not get into economics until you got into B school. I regret the fact that I did not get into economics even during B school.
So there were two subjects that I really liked from a first term in B school, which was microeconomics and OB1, right? The rest of OB is fuck all. But OB1 is basically where they introduce you to cognitive biases and all of that. So what that meant was that obviously I didn't do anything of note during B school, but post that these two sort of interests actually coalesced into a further exploration of behavioral economics, as it were, right? And when I say exploration, it doesn't mean like I've read tomes and tomes. It just means that whenever such a topic comes up, it is of interest to me. Like free economics is great, like Misbehaving by Richard Taylor is great. Even something unrelated like Alchemy, which is a book around marketing, basically thinking in bets is an extension of that same thing, right? I think the other person would be Rolf Dobelli, who had one great book on just basic biases that you have.
See, this is the difference, Tony, between you and me. When you said Alchemy, which is a book about marketing, my mind went to Paulo Coelho's Alchemist, and I'm like, that's definitely not about marketing. They're like, oh, okay, that's a different book. You also mentioned some Dobelli talking about biases, whatever, I'm reminded of George Dobell, who is very biased towards English cricket. So, yeah, clearly, we have two people who participate in this podcast. One person who is erudite,
please.
happy about his interest in behavioral
Some
economics
rubbish.
and
No,
bets,
one second.
and who also learned economics in B school. And then you have another person who's just winging his way through life. This is why we create a nice podcast together.
I'm just trying to say, like, basically the ideas that I may or may not express or I have internalized over a period of time have largely been influenced by some of the very few books that I've read or listened to on Audible, right? So Alchemy, the actual name of the full name of the book is Alchemy, The Surprising Power of Ideas That Don't Make Sense, right? And this is a book by an author called Rory Sutherland. The other book that I mentioned, Rolf Dobelli, it is The Art of Thinking Clearly, right? And basically it just talks about all the cognitive biases that are there. And obviously there is like Dan Ariely, who I believe like has given a bunch of TED Talks and who's got a book which is called like Predictably Irrational, etc., etc. Right? So the natural extension of this is this book called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. Even the like staunchest sort of behavioral economics fan would sort of take a step back when we talk about something like thinking in bets, and that is probably why I thought maybe we'll talk about this. And I really don't want to be like pontificating something that is new or anything like that, but it's just something that I've internalized and I found it useful. So maybe Nitin, at least you might find it useful, or you'll find a new way to dismiss me. So that's basically the premise.
Let's go.
New way to dismiss me, I'll be out handling the ball or something like that.
Yeah.
What is the funniest way in which you've been dismissed?
In a game of cricket?
Or you've dismissed someone else?
No, I mean, I think I've been run out at the non-strikers end at some point. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I don't think I've been timed out. I've not played at levels in cricket where you're likely to get timed out.
Yeah,
so
correct,
thankfully.
Correct.
Yeah. Double touch.
No, same. But I think my claim to fame is that I used to love umpiring, right? Either fielding or umpiring. So if like my team is batting, I'd love to be the umpire, just to like show off, right? Like I would randomly call one shot just to show the like for people to ask questions and like me to point out that this is what one shot.
Yeah, I've had irritating characters like you while playing cricket. I know the type. I know the type. Yeah.
Okay. So before we move into our topic for the day, Nitin, last week we had introduced this wonderful platform for people to wish their friends on their birthdays with your whiskey honey voice, right? But this week, our friend Srinath Sripath has outdone what you've done previously with a clip of his own, right?
Nice.
And here it goes.
Oh, hello, Leftover Lasagna friends. I'm guessing all of you can hear me and judge for yourself who really has the whiskey honey voice. These lads, I tell you, they're lucky that I don't run a pod. Oh, and the real reason I'm here is it was my birthday this week. So yeah, happy birthday to me! Tony and Nitin, this is how they do guerrilla marketing for this pod. Or, if you're a bits and pieces listener, should we call it Gorilla and the Mist marketing? By getting an audience that is not a regular listener of the pod to make a mindless video to wish themselves happy birthday and pique interest in the pod. Anyway, that's me, Srinath Sripath, and thank you for having me on Leftover Lasagna.
You know, Nisha described my voice as whiskey honey, but the true whiskey honey voice, and this is single malt we are talking about, is really Srinath Sripath only. Yeah, so if all the apiaries in all of Switzerland were used to generate the most beautiful honey, and that was mixed with beautiful, fine single malt Glenfiddich, I don't even know very good whiskey at all, just making it up as I go, then you would get Srinath Sripath's voice. So yeah, brilliant. I think we this needs to be in the top tier of what we charge our listeners now to be
correct.
For them to get a chance to listen to more of
If you want Srinath's voice, then we have a different tier. Right?
Yeah, different tier.
You can subscribe.
Yeah. This one is offered for free because he was wishing himself, which is like weird.
Correct.
But next time he'll be wishing our dear listeners, so they will have to pay more money.
Amongst the many things that Srinath has introduced us to is this universally extendable concept called the boy syndrome, which was that when you were in school, if it was someone's birthday, you couldn't basically
Yeah.
like make fun of him that day, right?
Yeah.
Like because he's
It's a
giving
free
out a
pass.
mango bite. Yeah, mango bite. What did you have? Did you have that
Lacto
Milky
King.
Bar eclairs? I think what
Lacto
was
King.
the top tier?
Lacto King, man.
King.
I grew up on
There was
that
also
stuff.
something
Yeah.
called Soft Spot, which I believe came for like 25 paise, but was very nice. So
See, my favorites
I
were
don't know.
Lacto King, caramel. I really like caramel.
What did you
And
give on your birthday? Oh, caramel.
Lacto King and caramel. Caramel. Sorry, I'm calling it caramel. Did you make the ring with the caramel wrapper and the golden
Of course, yeah.
internal wrapper and wear the
Correct.
ring? Yeah, I used to have a
Yeah.
bunch of those rings. Like I used to look like one of those Surat diamond
No,
merchants.
the saddest thing about my school time was that my birthday comes in April, which was like vacation time. So I never got to like be birthday boy, right? Like it was
Mine is
like,
worse.
long standing. Why yours is October 12th?
Because
No,
because my birthday has been
Dasera.
faked. My parents faked my birthday to put me into school early. And the thing they told me was, your friends should never find out when your actual birthday is because you could land into trouble if they do. So I would go to school on my birthday in October. Sometimes it would fall during the Dashara holidays, but on days when it did not, I would just quietly go to school like it was any
So
other
what is
normal day.
your what is your on paper birthday?
May 29th. Not like I was celebrating that. And
Okay.
I think that
So
used to come.
May
No, that
20
wasn't
so
in the
if you
vacation,
want
but
to-
you can't really celebrate the day which is not your birthday. So I didn't celebrate.
So May 29th, and what is your mother's maiden name? Just in case we want to hack your account. Something like that. This is what social engineering is. Okay, so Nitin, so let's get into the topic of the day with because we are doing this visually. Let's play a game of rock paper scissors. Are you ready?
Okay. Yeah. Did this time. It was
Rock,
perfect.
pa-
Yeah.
Okay, rock paper scissors shoot. Day. Okay, I won.
Yeah. Yeah, you won 2-0. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so
This is why you're good at
Yeah,
betting.
so basically-
you get this right.
so basically Nitin showed paper and I showed scissors, right? And
second
interestingly enough, there was a high stakes game of rock paper scissors played out between Christie's and Sotheby's, right? This is a beautiful episode of 99% Invisible. Okay, so basically the premise was that this Japanese guy,
Okay.
had an art collection which he wanted to auction off, and which is worth around 20 million, right? And both the salespeople of Christie's and Sotheby's were close to him, and they were basically like, buttering him up over 2 years. And he's like, I can't decide. So here's what you do: you play a game of rock paper scissors. Just submit it in an envelope, right? And basically, I think Christie's went with scissors and they won, right? And but here's the thing, right? That when you think of it as a bet, you're immediately thinking this is unfair, etc., right? But the whole point is that every decision is a bet on the future, right? So when you're talking about thinking in bets, even if you say I am not a betting person, you're doing it all the time, right? So whether it is in terms of let's say doing this podcast or not, you're essentially calculating the expected value or happiness out of doing this, or the opportunity cost of doing this versus doing something else, right? So or if you choose to sort of take up a job or not take up a job, or become a parent or not, there are outcomes that can go either way, right? Like you might
Yeah.
take up a job that is horrible and then like you quit within no time, or you might move to a different country and figure out that it doesn't work out. All of these things are ultimately bets, right? So any
Yeah.
decision is a bet on the future, right? So that's the starting point.
Interesting. Yeah. Say more. I mean, I don't. There's nothing to disagree here. This is broadly true, right?
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Correct. Just to extend maybe to a few episodes of what we've been talking about, I think largely both of us have agreed on how life is fairly random, and there is a lot of luck involved. However, that doesn't mean that every kind of luck is just luck, right? What I mean to say is that life is probably probabilistic and not entirely random. We are essentially saying if every decision is a bet on the future, how do you make better decisions for yourself? That is realistically the outcome that you're looking at, basically. Within one of the one of the other qualities that people call out on the group is how I'm a ticket collector, right? which is basically I go back in time and bring up things people have said and ask, hold on, this is what you said in the past, right? I'm not sure if it's like random or it's by design, because here's the other thing that I do is I look at something like our world test championship table from time to time, and probably only the only other person other than the guy updating the ICC table who keeps looking at it to say, look, this is where the standings are. And before every cricket season, I say India will, be one of the two finalists. I don't know. And after India loses every final, I say this is a matter of luck, right? So that has remained consistent, and this is borne out by all of the bits and pieces episodes that have been there, right?
Which is fine. Again, it's yeah, this is true. Tony is the custodian of the World Test Championship table in this era when Indian cricket fans, especially now, are T20 is the flavor of the season, especially this week since India has won the T20 World Cup after many years of trying and coming close. Tony, of course, is a custodian of the older format of the game, where India have played two finals. Really, across the three formats of cricket, India has famously been playing finals for a while, or semi-finals, and unfortunately falling short, except now they finally did win the T20 World Cup. So we have had two editions of the Test Championship. Both times India reached the final, in fact dominated their way to the final and were the number one team on the table. Lost finals, and the finals are one-off Test matches. Some people might say that Test cricket isn't as random as T20 cricket is, and a one-off Test match, well, it's not as good as playing an entire Test series, is not a very unfair way to decide who the winner of a Test championship is. But it so happened that India have lost to New Zealand and to Australia the last two times.
Correct.
So again, my personal take is that predicting that India would reach close to the final or even the final is a fairly safe bet to take. They are the most well-resourced, one of the strongest teams in the game, and most likely would, with a very, very strong home record. Let's also not forget that much stronger at home than lots of other teams are, and also traveling very well. So it's a fairly it's not a contrarian bet to say that India are likely to be in the final. And but still, props to you. You did make that bet. Yes, and you got it right.
No, it's not about props to me, right? And the other thing that I keep saying, which you guys rightly keep ridiculing me for, is that New Zealand are always lucky, right? And obviously there is an element of facetiousness to it when I sort of keep hating on New Zealand, right? But also there is an element of truth in the fact that if I am sort of looking at a broad range of how a team has done over a period of time, I am saying that like they are lucky in the sense that they don't deserve to be in the top four or the top two in terms of how they've performed over a period of time. Right? That doesn't mean that they are not there or they've not won the match or whatever. It just means that I am indexing luck as a function of a larger sample size of how people have performed. Okay, if you want to react to that, please. Like, my New Zealand hate is very, very famous, and I won't say it is entirely rational either. Right? You'll be the first person to call it out. So yeah.
In fact, no, I wouldn't even call that out. But I mean, sport is inherently random, right? And I think the fact that I don't entirely disagree with your comment on New Zealand. They definitely are probably not in the top two teams in the world. But there was a sequence of, I would say, 3 years in which they made 3 consecutive finals in the across formats. They made the One Day World Cup final, they made the T20 World Cup final, and they made the Test Championship final. And that really is, goes in a sense, sort of flies in the face of your confidence in saying that India would reach the final of a T20 or would reach the final of the WTC, right? My overall, at least an early reaction to when I say I don't really believe in taking one-off bets, right, on things. And very often you say, put your money where your mouth is, say who's going to win this World Cup, for example. I'd be like, that's one random event, right? And if you look at people who consistently win at the World Series of Poker, for instance, right, which is, some would say every hand of poker has quite an element of luck built into it and a lot of skill. But there's a reason why the same 100 people or the same 100, 200 people repeatedly figure in the top levels of poker at the World Series of Poker year after year, right? And that really shows that even a game where luck plays a huge role, the kind of hands that you get
Yeah.
play a huge role in whether you win or not, eventually is decided not so much by one big bet paying off, but by some great
Yeah.
people or great players, very very strong players, playing the odds to their favor over many many small bets, right? And so
Yeah.
my belief, and this is something that came back to my mind recently. I think Roger Federer gave this commencement address at Federer gave a beautiful speech, but the point that I
Yeah. This
remember
was
from
fun.
that speech was, and this was a great point
Yeah.
that Federer made. Federer, of course, if people actually don't know, probably the greatest men's tennis player to have played the game. Definitely one of the top three.
Roger that.
Citation needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger that. And through the course of his career, Roger Federer won 80% of the matches he played. Right. The point that he made is, even me, who lots of people consider to be the greatest player, I might have won 80% of my matches, but I only won 54% of the points that I played. Right.
Correct.
And that was good enough to be the top player in the world. Example from the real world that kind of says the same thing is
Yeah.
Warren Buffett, right, who is one of the most famous
Yeah.
investors that the world has ever seen, has made tons and tons of money on the stock market. Only got
Yeah.
like a very small percentage of his bets that really paid off big time, and lots of
Brilliant.
them actually failed, right? So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
point I'm trying to say is ultimately you need to be in a position in life where you're able to take many small bets and take them well, so that over
Yeah.
a period of time you get outsized returns from the few that go right, and you don't end up
Yeah.
losing too much on the ones that don't
Yeah.
pan out, because that is the nature of life and that really
Yeah.
is the nature of bets. But fully agree with everything else you said. Like everything we do in life is ultimately
Yeah.
a small
No,
bet
wait.
on the
One
future.
second. One second.
Yeah.
What you're saying is actually entirely what I'm saying, right? So the only difference is we are not looking at maximizing returns in terms of money or whatever. I am saying that if every decision is basically a bet on the future, how do you build a process or a system that gives you this edge? Right? For instance, simple question, and if you go into a casino, which game should you play?
I think you have an answer for this, so go for it. It's
No,
not
no.
roulette.
Which game should you play? I
It's
mean,
not slots.
where would you
It's
go?
not. I would,
Yeah.
if
Why?
I would play poker because it's a game that I enjoy. But I think that's not the answer you're looking for.
Okay.
So tell me.
No, correct. No. So see, here's the thing, right? So why does the house always win?
Because that's the nature of the way the bets are spread. The house takes a rake on every
Correct.
single
So
bet,
let's
right?
take
So
the
yeah,
simplest example, which is like a roulette table, right? Which is basically you have 36 numbers, and then obviously within that you have colors, etc., etc.
yeah,
What they basically add is either 1 0 or 2 zeros. Right?
yeah,
What this means is that 1 in 37 times, or the house edge is that narrow, right? So 1 in
yeah,
30. American roulette actually has 2,
yeah,
which means about 5.26%, etc., right? Basically the house edge means that the house has a over and above probability of beating you at the particular game that you're playing, right? So realistically, if you are not playing poker, you should probably be playing blackjack. Why? Because the house edge is only 0.5%, or video poker if that exists, right? So blackjack, if you're playing optimally and like you're able to sort of think and do basic counting, you have a higher edge. But even in that case, a 0.5% edge, which means that zero point 0.5 out of 100 times the house will win out, is enough for them to profit in the long run. Right? So
yeah.
we are basically saying, in terms of thinking in bets, if you are able to improve your decision making process by even 0.5%, then you will end up with more favorable outcomes. That's the whole intuition.
But I have a counter to that. There is the reason the house
Please.
always wins is not because they have odds, as you said, slim odds, but odds where they wipe out everyone at the table. The reason the house always wins is because the house is always playing, right? The reason the house always
Yeah.
wins is
So
because the house pretty much has spread its risk across every single hand in every single game that is played inside the casino.
yeah.
That is the position. Now, real skill is to get into a position in life
Yeah.
where you're able to
Yeah.
amortize your risk across enough shots
Yeah.
that you're able to take and not put all your
Okay.
eggs into one basket, because then
Yeah.
it's down to then it's down to luck.
Two parts is when we went to the casino the first time, the obvious thing to play would be roulette, right? And your basic intuition is that if you, let's say, put money on red or black, right, and then kept doing it progressively. So let's say you put 100 rupees on red first and you lost, and you like probabilistically 1 in 2 times red should come, right, and then you're again betting on red, again you lose. But this time you had put 200, so that if you win
This
even
is the
once, you're covered.
this is famously called the martingale strategy, where you keep doubling
Correct.
your
Yeah.
stake
So you-
each
so you-
time, so that
so you go
eventually when you
progressive.
win it sort of compensates for all the hands that you've lost until then, and you break even.
Yeah.
That's the concept.
But the
Yeah.
big problem is that exponents are sort of not intuitive, right? And before you know it, you go bust, right? For instance,
Of
in the
course.
last IPL tournament, was it Ruturaj
Probably.
Gaikwad? I think it was Ruturaj Gaikwad, right? Like
Yeah.
the CSK guy who lost 13 out of 14 tosses, right? Technically, it should be like 7-7, like or like
Yeah.
8-6 max. But there can be scenarios where you go 13-1, right? And I think this is where that famous chess story comes, right? Where this guy basically told the king that all I need is one grain to be placed on the first square, and on every subsequent square you double it, right? And it meant that you were supposed to give me as many rice grains are there in all the squares combined, right? And I think by like, I don't know, 16th or the 32nd square or something, the entire kingdom got bankrupt, right? So
Right.
moment you try to go progressive, you're screwed, right? But the counter intuition to what you said, Nitin, is that when we say life is poker, is the idea that do you know a good player in poker? What percentage of hands do they bet on?
I don't know the exact number, but it's quite low. Right, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So this is the brilliant part, right? That in poker, on average, a good player folds about 80% of their hands, which
Yeah.
means like 20% of the time is when you play, right? So this is a beautiful counterintuitive thing that you can apply even to life itself, right? Where you are always sort of saying bias for action is something that is
Yeah.
valued, right? As opposed to just sitting tight and letting life take its course is probably a better off option in many of the scenarios. I think we'd referred to this instance previously where we were talking about goalkeepers and whether they should dive right or dive left for the penalties. And
Yeah.
technically, like the game theory optimal becomes, just stay still, right? But the
Yeah.
problem is you end up looking like a fool, right? And similar case with something like when we talk about like Manuel Boys, right? And the guy who basically fell down, he was the only guy who got saved, but probably because he was in a position where he couldn't move at all, right? And
Yeah.
the others probably tried moving about and got lost in that sense, right? And the same intuition applies to something like on a previous episode when we had mentioned about what should you do to make a system stable, add more to it or subtract just one block from it, right? And this is not always apparent, right? To say that the discipline therefore of like making better decisions is actually to not make a bet like 80% of the time, right?
And by the way, that
as
is itself
opposed to
a
when you say
decision.
the house always wins,
That itself is a decision, right? So even in poker,
Correct.
I know you said it. The reason Manjumel Boy is a very good example. It took me a moment to internalize what you were saying. The person who got stuck in the pit only got saved because he was stuck and he couldn't move further.
Yeah.
It wasn't a conscious choice.
He was not the
as we
first
find out.
person to fall down.
Exactly.
By the way,
Yeah.
right? There were
Yeah.
like some hundreds of people who had fallen down.
Like you
never
said,
to
who
be
probably tried to wriggle and ended up going deeper into the pit. Whereas this guy was knocked out cold and hence not really trying to move out, and hence did not end up wriggling himself way into the depths. But in real life, as it is in poker, right, that
Yeah.
top player, right, who keeps winning and is only taking bets 20% of the time and is folding 80% of the time. The decision to fold is a very, very deeply thought and calculated decision. It is a decision, really.
Of course.
It's not a
Of course it is.
choice to let life pass by, as you were saying. But
Yeah.
but your point is right. Right, the bias for action might not always be the way to go. Very often, making a very considered
Yeah.
choice to do nothing could end up being
Yeah.
very, very beneficial in life. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so I was also trying to place it against your point of saying the house always wins because house plays every hand, right? And that's not necessarily the case here. So essentially, what you're making
No. What
is
I was
that,
trying to say. Let me rephrase. Right. So the house is playing against every single person who enters the casino.
correct.
The advantage the house has over all of them is that they're not even considering the house as an opponent. They are always fighting against
Correct.
either an imaginary opponent, which is luck in the case of games like roulette, or they're playing against someone else sitting at their table, right? Whereas the house is this
Correct.
beast that is quietly taking a small piece of every single. And what you said, in a game like poker, there is a rake, right? So every single hand, actually, the house ends up making some
Correct.
money because someone ends up
Yeah.
winning every single hand in poker. There's no stalemate that happens where the house wins the entire hand, but there is a rake that
Yeah,
goes to
of
the
course.
house each time. But the beauty is nobody else is playing the long game or the longest possible game, which is only being played by the house. Which is why in poker,
Correct.
when you're playing against opponents, you will always have these newbies who come in. And typically, this is how people get sucked into poker, right? They come in, experience 2 or 3 hands, like the idea of poker, get some beginner's luck, win a few hands, suddenly think that they've cracked this game, and think that, maybe
Yeah.
if I just play for another 10 minutes and I can just,
Yeah.
quadruple my winnings, then I'm done and then I'm
Yeah.
going out. Typically, it
Yeah.
never works out because the experienced players are playing a very different game to what these people are trying to
Yeah.
play. They're watching the way you play, they're
Yeah.
understanding the hands, they're playing the odds, they're doing pot odds, and
Correct.
all that other stuff that goes in on poker. The
Yeah.
reason they win is because they stay in the game long enough
Yeah.
to wipe it out. But yeah,
Yeah. No, so I think in the effort to trip over each other to try and throw in more jargon, we missed out the basics, right? Which is that if you see a hand of poker that is shown in a movie or in a book or James
yeah,
Bond, etc., it's
yeah,
usually like someone is flinching with their
huh,
face or some shit like that, right?
yeah,
None of that is the case, right? It's not dramatic at all. Like
yeah,
a good poker player is the one who can grind it out for the longest,
yeah,
suck it up, not look at any kind of emotions, right? Or
yeah,
not go on tilt, as it is called. It
yeah,
is just pure math, right? It is
yeah,
just pure math to say this is the hand I have. These are the things that I can't predict.
yeah,
But given that it is a set of 52 cards, these are the
yeah,
likely hands that other people have. Therefore, my probability of winning, given the
yeah,
size of the money or the amount that is there,
exactly.
is so
Yeah,
much. Therefore, I continue betting or not, right? So it is
yeah, that's
basically a very, very mathematical thing. So if you're
correct.
saying, imagine like showing James Bond folding like 4 hands out of 5 and
Yeah,
sitting there and like basically like doing math in his head, right? And like there is no like big throwdown or something. It's probably
yeah,
like the other guy folds at some point
yeah.
and like you're
Yeah,
sort
what
of
we see
winning
in
out.
poker movies is absolute rubbish. I mean, not any movie where you're shown
Yeah.
a big poker scene. Typically, what they show you
Yeah.
is just cinema. It's not really poker.
Look, so the absolute basic essence of what we want to avoid is this thing called resulting, right? Which we all tend to do, which is basically once an event has happened, all of us like to say, I told you so, right? This was obvious. So, what a bet does is essentially divorces decision quality from outcomes in some senses, right? Or it locks away the decision before the event has happened. So if you're going to say that, let's say India is going to win or New Zealand is going to win, and you're sort of putting your money where your mouth is, which does not need to be a monetary consideration. You are essentially saying, can I lock in this decision before the event has happened? And sort of evaluate it over a period of time. Otherwise, you and me included, everyone just gets into this mode of post facto saying that I told you this would happen. Right. So when you say put your money where your mouth is, that is essentially it. That a decision quality is not really dependent on the outcome, or you've made the decision before the outcome has happened. Now, whether it is luck or skill, um, if you are making enough of these sort of decisions which are cataloged over a period of time, you get to see how you've been doing, right? And whether you need to recalibrate some of your thinking, or if it is accurate or bet. What betting allows you to do, and you're saying that if everything is a bet at the end, every decision is a bet, is that it allows you to keep a PNL of all your bets made in the past or all your decisions made in the past. So let me explain this a little bit, Nitin. I think this is cue for you to bring in Yuval Noah Harari again. Our brains have not evolved since the original times where we used to live with animals, hunter gatherer era, etc., which meant that any sort of disturbance, right, meant that you flee, right? Like, so if there
Yeah,
is a rustling in the grass, you're not waiting to figure out if it is a snake or if it is something else. Your
yeah,
brain is immediately telling you to flee.
yeah,
How this plays out right now is that when we talk about people falling prey to fake news or some other things, is that how you believe something is not a systematic process of evaluation followed by something followed by belief. It is that whatever you hear, most likely you will believe. Right. So your bias as a human brain is to believe the things that you're told and question very few, right? So I think on a previous episode we spoke about how our parents don't fact check as much as us. It's also because the environment they grew up in required very little fact checking by virtue of having so many media
Yeah.
sources that used to be broadly like true, right? So it is a combination of the human brain as it has evolved plus the systems that they were part of.
As well as our inherent biases, right? So if we already have a certain point of view,
Correct.
we tend to believe anything
Yeah,
that corroborates that point of view.
exactly.
We are likelier to
Exactly.
question something that goes against our point of view. In fact, I've
Beautiful.
experienced myself doing this all the time. So yeah,
Correct.
sure, yeah,
No, of
yeah,
course. I know. I mean, this is everyone, right? Like by
yeah,
virtue of being human, this is what you do, right?
yeah,
I think we had brought up the same thing when we were talking about vaccines, right? And right, Covishield and that whole
yeah,
story around how it has caused damage or something like that. The
yeah,
headlines are again primed to sort of make you question a different thing. But the idea there is that you basically believe whatever is given to you and then you don't question it, and therefore there is a problem, right? And similar example is probably by virtue of being liberals in India in that sense, and believing the narrative that all of the institutions are stacked against uh, anyone who opposes, let's say, the BJP, for instance, is that you will end up believing something like EVMs are being hacked.
yeah,
But the statistical probability of that is extremely low. I think even like this week in Parliament, Akhilesh Yadav stood up and said that I'll never believe EVMs or something like that, right? Which is again not the correct thing to do, right? Just because it suits your narrative doesn't mean you don't question it, right? So this is another important part to say that your beliefs or what you sort of look at is something called motivated reasoning, right? Which is that you already have a set idea of how the world works, and anything that fits into that narrative you
yeah,
automatically take into account, and then disregard the rest. This is also compounded by the other phenomenon, which is that I think there was a beautiful tweet. I'll try to bring it up, where someone tweeted out, "You can use facts to change people's minds,"
yeah.
and this other person brought up multiple papers, which has proved comprehensively that facts do not change people's opinion, right? Like, there is scientific rigor to this paper that is published, except the original person is like, no, I don't believe it, that methodology must be flawed. Right. Like
Yeah,
disproving his own point that
yeah,
facts
proving
can
the
actually
opposite.
make
Yeah,
people question it. Yeah.
huh.
In this construct is why betting becomes a clarifying process, right? So when you say and by virtue of being in podcasts where you don't necessarily have to explain your methodology of why you arrived at a conclusion or what are the possible loopholes there, you're just holding forth on an opinion. You are free to make it, right? Because it's a free country. But the moment says someone says wanna bet, then you're saying, wait, how much do I know about this, right?
Yeah,
And you're actually sort of going back and questioning to say, is this something that is a fact or something I heard and pass off as an opinion? And am I willing to lose, let's say, 1,000 rupees on this, or like my izzat on this, as it were? So that is why wanna bet actually becomes like a clarifying process to say,
that's fine.
maybe I need to go back and reevaluate, as opposed to believing everything that comes my way just by way of how I've sort of consumed information. Which is why thinking in bets becomes extremely invaluable to give you maybe even that 0.5% edge to make better decisions. That is the whole idea of
No, yeah,
betting.
in principle, fully agree with that point, right? My pushback is when you say something like India are going to make the final of the World Test Championship,
Yeah,
right? There are all
yeah,
kinds of spanners that could fall into
of course.
India's path to enter that final,
Yeah,
and over and above any kind of calculation or knowledge-based advantage that I'm likely to have. into the future, which says that they will make the final. Right? It could
Yeah.
anything. Right? It could rain on a particular day where they have to win a certain game to win a certain series to
Correct.
get the sufficient points to make the final. For instance, a team as good as Australia did not actually make the final, right, in the first
Correct.
World Test Championship cycle, and there are other teams that have come close and missed out, etc. So when we are saying things like, okay, should I, when I'm playing poker, for instance, right, it's an agglomeration of several small bets where one outsized outcome is going to, pay off in a big way. I'm willing to
Correct.
make those bets, right, with whatever information I have, whatever pot odds that I'm able to sort of foresee. I'm willing to go in and make a call where, let's say I have a 70, or let's say I have a 40%, 50, 60% chance of winning a hand, right? Every time you
Yeah.
have a chance of
Yeah.
winning a hand that's over 50%, you're supposed to take it, and which is how you end up winning in poker when you play sufficient hands.
Yeah.
But if I'm betting on whether a team is likely to win a certain cricket match, right, there's so much that's happening there that's out of my control, and it's not just the simple probability of the cards that are likely to open, which is completely predictable. Which is where a small another example of the dichotomy that I'm trying to explain is why, if you're investing in, say, mutual funds, right, you are taking
Yeah.
bets. You're taking many small bets. You're taking many small bets in probably not in situations that are entirely in your control, but you have a reasonable level of control in predicting how a certain company is going to perform in the stock market, right, based on whatever public information is out there. It's not very transparent. You don't have all the information you need, but you have far more information when you bet in the stock market itself, right? Even if you're going on a tilt and betting on one particular company, but you're even diversifying even that risk when you do something like mutual funds, where you're really in effect betting on hundreds of companies at the same time. So even if a small percentage of them have outsized returns, you end up with a fairly decent return, as opposed to investing in something like real estate, right? And this again is something that we have experienced in India, again a function of the kind of lives our parents led and the kind of lives we lead as a result of that, because this is something we've all grown up hearing from our parents, right? You need to invest in a house because that's the most reliable way to grow your whatever wealth, because that investment is always going to pay off, and you get an asset that you can emotionally invest into for the rest of your life, and so on.
Yeah.
Been borne out now across many of the biggest cities in India, where people have been investing, and there have been all kinds of constructions that have been happening, projects coming out, people investing in plots and apartments. And broadly, real estate as a vehicle of investment, on average, is not something that has borne out results that are close to even beating inflation or close to being profitable. Yet people continue to invest in real estate, which in my mind is, it's like taking that one-off bet as opposed to playing the percentages and taking many small bets, right? That's one of the reasons. Also because I was also saying you have far lesser information, because typically your builder, or in India, sadly, politicians, or the councillors have far more information than you do, and hence once you have lesser information, you are poorer off in the arbitrage market. You don't know what metro line is going to come up where, in which part of the city, but someone else does. So if you're not the person who knows that information, then you are the sucker, because someone else does know that. And so no two properties are the same. The information you have access to is not the same as the information someone else has access to. In cases like that, the smart thing to do is not to bet and then say, hey, obviously 5% of the people who bet in real estate are going to come up trumps and have outsized returns. But they really have just gambled and gotten lucky. Whereas the remaining 95% have not had that luck. The smarter thing to do is to actually not bet on that particular market, right? So my
No.
2 cents on this whole point, or at least what I was trying to say, was you don't have
See,
to
this
take
is the
every bet.
problem. This is the problem. You are only putting 2 cents on this highly considered
Exactly.
opinion of yours. You should be betting more. Like the ante should be
Fair
more for
point.
the outcome to be more. Right.
Up
So,
the ante. Yeah.
so just to clarify, right? Like the problem, I think, is when you mention a bet, you are looking at a financial outcome, right? So it's not necessarily just about how much money you make. It's also a thought process, right? Which is why it's interesting to me. Like, to be honest, I think by virtue of knowing me virtually, you'll also know that I don't really care that much about money beyond a threshold, right? Like, if it's below a threshold, maybe like I'll work harder to get to that level where I can sort of feel comfortable, right? Beyond that, I've luckily not had the evil of money being a factor that influences my life, right? There are several other vices which I shall not let on, but money is not one of them. The whole idea is that your entire adult life is a process of trying to get closer to the truth more objectively, right? And why bets make more sense. In that sense, so when I'm talking about India making the final, it's not obviously about 100% chance that India will make the final, right? You are saying that there is a realistic probability, like 80 to 85%, that India will make the final. Why? It is also dependent on how the previous sort of stage is structured. So, whenever it is a league format and there are 10 teams playing each other, I am fairly confident that India will make the semis, because it means that over like 10 games, your um, likelihood of luck overpowering something else is
Absolutely.
mitigated.
Yeah.
Right? That is the whole point. So you're never talking about 100% absolutes. You're talking about confidence levels. Right?
Yeah.
The same thing with like something like weather is that we've always made fun of weather, saying like I think the most common refrain on Akashvani or one of those radio channels when we were growing up was that in these parts there is a chance that it will rain and it may not rain. And you're like, what the fuck kind of prediction is
Yeah.
this? Like, tell us it'll rain or not rain, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point is that based on their modeling, there is a 50% chance it may rain, 50% chance it may not rain, right?
Yeah.
Or even a 30% chance of rain is pretty. It will happen once in 3 days, right? Which is pretty significant, right? Should the decision is should I take my umbrella out or not, right? Along with me as I go.
Yeah.
So that is the difference in what we need to understand. Right? So, moving on to the financial market of things from cricket side, right? And obviously this is deeply personal, and everyone has a way of looking at it. Most likely, philosophically and psychologically, it is influenced by what your parents have gone through, right? So if they've had a negative experience in something, next generation is obviously going to like take that entire thing out of their portfolio, right? But however, I think the basic way to sort of look at it is to say, again, you're dividing up your ability to invest into certain chunks to say, I need this much as a basic return, right? Which is what you put into guaranteed government bonds or one of those like safer bets, right? Gold, etc., etc. Then you're looking at a chunk that says, I need higher returns, right? And the reason for higher returns is obviously there is a higher risk with this set of instruments that you are putting into. Then in my opinion, you need to have a fund, right, where about like 20% you are taking punts on things based on what you think will perform well, what you research, etc., etc., right? And obviously, like when they're failing, you're not telling other people that they failed, right? For instance, anyone who knows me closely enough, I would have said like, why the fuck aren't people buying Facebook shares when it went down to like $90 or something like
This
that,
was
right?
back
And
in
right now,
20. When was this? That it went down to 90?
yeah, I think no, this was around November 2022.
Ah, okay.
It was at 90.79 US dollars, right? And right now it is at 540 US dollars, right? And I was basically asking around because like I didn't understand this. Obviously, I know a little bit about how Facebook's model works by virtue of being a part of that ecosystem, etc. And the only reason why it failed was apparently, not sure about the exact numbers, but Facebook's overall users didn't grow, or
Yeah.
it grew from 2.91 billion users to 2.92 billion users or something like
Which
that.
was their
And they're
slowest
like, this growth is too
growth.
low.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lowest growth in a quarter.
And I'm
Correct.
like, wait, what the fuck? There are like 8 billion people in the world, out of which probably like 4 billion or whatever is your addressable market. This is no reason for you, like a stock to be downgraded so much, right? And obviously, in hindsight, it's like a great thing for me to say because like it was at around 380, which fell down all the way to 90. And I was asking everyone around me, like, why are people not buying it? And anyone who I knew, I told, basically, maybe buy Facebook stock, right? Again, I only put 2 cents into it, so I didn't make too much money. But
Yeah.
right now it is at 540, right? But I think like in your portfolio, you also need to have maybe 20% of
Sure.
the thing that you can have fun with. That's all I would say. At the same time, like again, like my aversion to real estate is driven by two things. One is that my dad had a really bad time with real estate, putting in all of his savings into it, and like I knew how much he ran from pillar to post to get rid of it. fluctuations, etc., etc. And also, there are so many middlemen involved, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, if there is a system that allows you to just do it at a click of a button without having to
Yes.
talk to another person, then that is the
Yeah.
most efficient way to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a no-brainer. But yeah, glad that we agree on
Yeah.
something.
No, but again, you're thinking in bets. The idea is that everything is risky, right? The moment you're sort of investing, the idea is that if I keep it safe in my thing, it won't grow. If
Of course.
I
Yeah.
then it is 100% safe, unless like demonetization happens. But everything else has an element of risk to it,
Yeah.
right?
There
And
is. Yeah.
whether you succeed or not is obviously a function of time. Like risk can wipe out even the best investor for sure, right?
Of
And I
course.
think
Yeah.
Nitin, yours was the batch that graduated during the Lehman Brothers times, right? You'll probably know this better than most.
Yes.
What was your sort of take then as the batch that just
Oh, I was
walked in as the world blew up?
I, by the way, interned at Lehman Brothers 1 year before they went down. So I believe I was the reason.
Who's this? I am the because.
I am the because. Yes, so I interned with Lehman Brothers in the summer of 2007, which is at the end of my first year. The only time I've done anything remotely close to the financial market. So I was at the investment banking desk of Lehman Brothers in London. And 1 year later,
Yeah.
they promptly collapsed. Around that time, my wife was also in my now wife, then not yet wife, was also in investment banking. So she used to work at Morgan Stanley, which of course survived the crisis, but it was a bloodbath. But it's funny how things pan out, right? And nobody could have predicted this. But the fact that a lot of people got laid off from my batch, like barely months into their first job out of B school. And not just people who worked in investment banking, right, or worked in banks, because the financial crisis was so widespread. You had people in other industries also losing their jobs, right? And it so happened that it was just a perfect storm because that was around the time that startups were taking off in India, right? So Flipkart really became a name that you started hearing about. Oh, this company that sells books, but they're actually going to take on Amazon. They're going to try and do what Amazon did, but for India. And there were people from my batch, or even 1 year junior to me. In fact, it hit them even worse because they did their internships in 2008, and they came into a job market that really was not a job market at all. Lots of them ended up taking jobs at Flipkart and later on, at InMobi, at Zomato, all the small tech startups. And the concept of a tech B2C startup in India really only came to be in that time. And a lot of those people who, at that stage were taking very, very risky, not even risky, they were kind of forced to take these jobs because there were no traditional jobs that were willing to take them at that stage. But these are the people who sort of got in at the, at the basement or at the ground floor in some of the biggest B2C startups that came out of India, and ended up having extremely wonderful experiences and careers. And they're not really bets; they were kind of default options, but they paid off very handsomely for a bunch of people. So yeah, I was there when that happened and saw it all go down. It was
No,
fun.
no, but technically, if you resort to thinking in bets, no one should start up, right? Like because like the success rate of a startup is like abysmally low,
It
and
is,
you
yeah.
basically lost X amount of years of earning potential, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess in some senses, it's a weird phrase, but a healthy level of delusion is good. Like an audacity is good if you want to do outsized things. Right?
Yes and no, right? So, I mean, yes, broadly, yes. I think the climate for taking bets in entrepreneurship has also changed so much in India, right? Since the time, at least I graduated or we graduated, which was 15 years back in my case. 2008 is when I graduated. I feel old. But you now have this entire ecosystem of, VCs and investors who are ready to fund great ideas and put a lot of money behind them because they've seen a bunch of them pay off and a lot of them trying to succeed, right? It wasn't the case back then. And I can speak from personal experience here, right? Again, like as you're well aware, I'm not someone who takes outsized bets. I've taken some random bets in my time, but startups or entrepreneurship was never my cup of tea. So while there were people in my circle, my batchmates, etc., who were entrepreneurs, I used to wonder, wow, that's like a huge bet that this person's taking. Hats off to them, but I don't have it in me to do this. My wife kept saying that we should do something, you should start up something. It took my wife about 6-7 more than that, like nearly 8-9 years after we graduated to finally
Yeah.
bite the bullet and become an entrepreneur. And when she did it, it was
Yeah.
after, between her and me, we had worked for long enough period of time and reached a certain level of stability where, one of us was comfortable enough taking that plunge, so to speak,
Yeah.
and going
Yeah.
into,
Yeah.
which again was a very, very safe choice. It's not like everybody was taking the safe choice. Lots of people were jumping into the unknown
Yeah.
earlier than that, but yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's risk profile is different. But ultimately, she did it, and
Of
also
course.
ended up having outsized return at the end of it. Right, very successfully ran a startup for 5 years and had a nice exit and all of that. So yeah, I mean, your
Yeah.
mileage may vary, but ultimately, yeah, it is a risky decision, and it's a decision to be taken with a lot of due consideration as to what it
Yeah.
can mean if it doesn't pan out. The good thing now, at least, right, for in
Yeah.
India at least, is there's a lot of value even for failed entrepreneurs, right? You go through the journey, you
Right.
come out on the other side chewed up, and you need to close your
Yeah.
startup idea after 4 years because yeah, you raised your Series A, but you
Yeah.
could not
You can
take
always
bigger.
start a podcast.
Always start a podcast. That's not going to help you. But there are so many companies that are looking for failed
Yeah.
entrepreneurs to come and become
Yeah.
very senior professionals in their lineup. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great time to try and do those things in India. I think one of the most exciting things about
Yeah.
India is the hustle and entrepreneurship, or the environment that encourages hustle and entrepreneurship that exists right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Neither you nor I nor our listeners hopefully care about this, because to be honest, like if you look at my career progression, it's probably been one of the more safer things to do, right? In that sense. However, what is not apparent is that both of us, in that sense, are fuck around and find out people, right? And really, what we are trying to find out is what is closest to the truth rather than what is valued at a high financial degree of success, right? So I'll give you a couple of examples of how this plays out, right? Which means that if I'm saying that by virtue of being a person who thinks in bets, as it were, I have a PNL of all my decisions, right, and how they've paid off. It means that I also have an internal compass of what works well for me versus what doesn't, right? And I think that is really important. So you will know this when we started out bits and pieces. It was probably Hank, me, and you who had the first conversation. And the only thing that there are only two things that I said, right? One is that we are going to run it for 50 weeks or 1 year without stopping. Every week we'll have an episode. Second thing is I said, look, this is not going to be an expert cricket podcast. This is going to be the friendliest cricket podcast, right? Which means anyone can come and say anything, right? And there's a little bit of like selfishness built into it in the sense that I knew for a fact that like I couldn't match up the chops of cricketing knowledge that the rest of the group had, and the only thing I would have to offer is banter, right? So if you don't set that up initially, then like I'm just gonna hate this for the 50 weeks that I set it up, right? So
Since then, you
I
came to
think
know your
what
friends better, and you realize that none of us have any jobs to have a serious discussion on cricket. But yeah,
this is not true at all, right? Like,
of course it
I
is.
mean, I still think. No. Okay, let me explain the
Rubbish.
second point. So.
Bunch of
No,
wankers on that group. Yeah, go on.
Of course,
Yeah,
like being a bunch of wankers is actually the USP of that group,
yeah, yeah.
by virtue of framing it that way. But the idea is that you know yourself well enough to know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are and where you should play. So the only thing that I uh, militantly chop off on this podcast or like stop you from even talking is when we solutionize things, right?
Ah,
And that is based on the understanding that we don't have enough information or understanding to pontificate on a bunch of things, right? And it'll just turn into like a random bunch of thoughts which seem ignorant. At the same time, I have no qualms about putting more and more of my personal experiences out there, right? Even to the extent of people saying, like, why the fuck is he putting out so much of him out there, right? And that is really sort of like a framework that has developed over the years to say, I am comfortable in sharing this. I don't think anyone really cares, in the sense that most people are basically just thinking about themselves, right? No
yeah.
one has a moment to spare to think about, oh, how is Tony's life going? As opposed to like if we are sort of solutionizing, then
Yeah.
it becomes a case of willfully sort of engaging in ignorant suggestions which really make no sense at all. So yeah, that's how like sort of thinking in bets actually feeds back into things that are like way beyond, let's say, financial implications, right? Which is what you think about when you think about a bet.
Understand? Yeah, you are a very well considered, thoughtful person who's very thoughtful about your own thoughtfulness. No, I'm saying this seriously, right? You're thoughtful about your own thoughtfulness to an extent that
Yeah.
you hold yourself to a yardstick for the decisions you make. And thinking in bets is
Yeah.
your own way of maintaining that discipline so that you have a very clear
Maintaining that
structure,
PNL,
which is
right?
excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Maintaining
good.
that PNL. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a strange person. That's broadly what I have to say. The rest of us are winging it.
Realized
It took us a while.
that
But
I'm
now
a
I
weirdo.
understand.
That I'm a weirdo. Yeah.
As a thought experiment, Tony, if I gave you a time machine
Huh.
and I only gave
Yeah.
you a time machine for, let's say, half an hour, okay, you only have access to the time machine for half an hour, at the end of which you will be brought back into exactly where you are now. Okay, how would you use
Yeah.
this time machine to your benefit?
Oh man, this is like I have a romantic answer and differentiated
Think
answer.
big,
Right?
Tony. What is the
So,
biggest thing you can do? Think big.
oh what? I don't know. Like you,
I mean,
feel
I'm like,
you
don't say
already
I'll go
have
and
an answer.
romantic answer only. Yeah, it's okay, but
96. I will go and marry Trisha. But
she's still available, by the way. Though the tabloids are linking her up with
really?
Vijay, but yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, I thought like there was some. Okay, anyway. No. So
But if
another
you had a
one
time machine, she'll
aspect
come
of
to you.
thing-
Don't worry. I mean, with your thoughtfulness and the time machine, I think Vijay doesn't have a chance. So yeah. What would you do?
No, so to be honest, I don't think I'm a very considered person at all. Right? Like a lot of the things that I do is impulsive, and I know this for a fact that I react to things in the moment way better than much
With
later
consideration. Yeah.
in time, right? So again, sort of like understanding that my brain has ADHD tendencies is to know that I am always interested in newer ideas, right? And therefore, any of the projects that I've succeeded in has an accountability partner, right? Even if it is just another person, you just tell them that I'm doing this. Like if I want to stay sober, I need to have someone who I'm telling, that for a period of time that I haven't had a drink today, or I want to have a drink today, or just having that accountability partner makes a huge amount of difference.
True.
But it also means that I fall out of love with ideas fairly quickly if there is no accountability to it, right? So, famously, for instance, I walked out from cryptic crosswords and it was a clean break, right? Like for the next 10 years, probably not even touched cryptic crosswords or Scrabble or any of those things. So everything has a period in time to which I'll do it and then changes. So I think if I'm given a time machine, it's probably just gonna go back. What would your answer be?
The reason I asked this question is, I mean, since we were talking about thinking in bets and we spoke about the stock market, so there is this
Yeah.
movie called Primer. I don't know if you've watched Primer.
No, I haven't heard
It's
of it.
there was this director called Shane Carruth, okay, and he made
Yeah.
only 2 or 3 movies, and I think he later got into trouble, as in he got cancelled or something for some reason. But one of the movies he made, and his movies are famous for being extremely low budget. So Primer was one of them. It was made on, I don't know, $20,000 or something. If you see it, you won't realize that it is such a low budget movie because he acts in it with a friend or a brother or something. Anyway, the concept in Primer is, and his movies are mind benders. Okay, so the concept of Primer is this couple of guys who invent, or rather come upon a time machine, and they basically use the time machine to, all they do is just do a simple thing, right? They go into the next day, they find out which stocks
Yeah.
are outperforming the next day, and they come back and invest huge chunks of money into those stocks today.
Yeah.
So they make a lot of money the next day, and they just use this
Oh,
arbitrage.
okay.
The movie goes into a philosophical direction to see, okay, what happens to those friends who actually have this machine, because this seems like the simple story is this is a happily ever after, right? You manage to get a hack, you get this arbitrage, and then you become rich, and yeah, who can stop you after that? But the access to this time machine fundamentally changes them as people, and I think they end up killing each other or something of that sort happens. But
Yeah.
anyway, But that was, I was just,
Okay,
since we're
so
talking
so
about
the
bets.
answer to your question is
Yeah.
that if I had the time machine, I'd probably go back and instead of investing in Meta, I would have invested in Nvidia, right? So that
There you
is
There you go. Exactly. Simple answer.
by
Yeah.
shovels, right?
There you go. That's a
answer.
simple.
No, but
if you had limited access to a time machine, the simplest thing to do is to get a stock market arbitrage advantage. What else? What else can you
correct,
do in this?
yeah.
Or go back and kill Hitler, when he was young or something. If you really want to be, very altruist.
Yeah. So the other outcome, so essentially thinking in bets is nothing but the knowledge that humans are irrational, and maybe if we try to be more rational, you can have happier outcomes, right? Let me explain this with another thing is that for the longest period of time I've considered myself a shy introvert, etc., etc. But I think at least on the cricket group most people will know me as the person who's always sort of saying, let if anyone's in the vicinity, let's have a meetup, not every day, but probably like once in 3 months, and making sure I show up also, right? And like doing things like splitting the bills on Excel sheets, etc., etc., right? And realistically, like irrespective of how far it is from my house, I would always end up there because of the simple reason that I'm looking at opportunity cost as opposed to fairness. Right. So there are two aspects to how people evaluate a decision.
Yeah.
Like there is, I think it's called the ultimatum game, no? Where let's say I'm given a 100 rupee note. Let's say the experiment organizer gives me a 100 rupee note and says I can keep how much ever I want for myself and give you the rest of the 100, and then like if you accept it, then both of us get to keep the amounts. If you don't, then both of us lose the amount, right? So technically if we were rational, I can keep 99 for myself and one for you because you're one better off than otherwise,
Correct.
right? But usually I think how the game works out is that it has to be around 55-45 or something, otherwise the person will say no, right? And it is a fairness equation as opposed to something like this where I consider the opportunity cost of meeting with some of the lovely people on our group, right? It's always to say that I'd probably not have a chance to meet them again, and therefore whatever is the pain involved in like taking a cab to this far or like puddling through rains, etc., etc., falls on the other side. And this is not like, I mean, I know you're shrugging because this is what you usually do also, but like lots of people sort of either like don't do something like this or are scared to ask someone if they want to meet, and have a coffee or a discussion because they are sort of worried about the fear of rejection, right? And this is where sort of something like when I said I'll never be a salesperson, this is where it changed my perspective to say, actually, if you're just fearing rejection, then in the equation of the payouts, a rejection is a very minimal point in time, right?
Yeah.
But the upside is huge. So if you're considering opportunity cost, you should always sort of take that risk positively.
This is, you and my wife Shruti should do a podcast. So the reason I say this is I mentioned her entrepreneurial journey, right? So Shruti has always been this extremely smart, math-oriented, extremely intellectual kind of person, right? Is how she herself probably would have described her own experience. So she got when she became an entrepreneur, right? So it was she along with two tech co-founders, so tech/product co-founders, who are both again very similar, reserved kind of guys who would love to code and love to do their own thing, and they weren't necessarily outgoing people, right? They're very happy with where they are, not the people who would typically become sales people, right? Now, in a startup, the one thing that is non-negotiable is that you need to have one founder who is out there pitching all the time, selling all the time, and is willing to go out there and speak to people and take these bets, and and it had to be Shruti by default because her co-founders weren't really cut out for it. Neither was she, but she decided that she will be that person, right? And also because she wasn't the tech co-founder, so she had to bring in value from somewhere else.
Right.
So she became literally the face of her brand and the salesperson. It's something that she had absolutely never done in her life, but she literally forced herself into becoming that person. And over a period of time, right? And very early, she got this realization. And I remember her saying it in exactly these words, saying, I have absolutely nothing to lose by going out there and putting myself out there. A rejection is a rejection. Who
Yeah.
cares about rejection? I don't know these people who are going to reject me
Correct.
also, and they are probably never going to think of me and see
Yeah.
me ever. But anything
Yeah.
that comes off, right? If I increase my surface area of serendipity by putting myself out there,
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
and
Yeah.
when something works out, and it's completely changed the way she leads her life, right? Even outside of
Correct.
work now,
Yeah.
and the way
Yeah.
she does things.
Yeah.
So yeah, fully agree with that point. Yeah.
No, this is brilliant, right? And like, is also validation because like I was the exact opposite person. Right? I remember like, hopefully my school friends are not listening when they like arrange meetups and like at the last minute I would like either have an excuse for not going or just like ghost, right? Like not answer the calls because like I'm like extremely worried about being socially awkward, that this and the other. To the transformation to being the other person has been a journey, right? And it is largely informed by this weird math led approach, as it were. So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
So, penultimate thought about this is that one thing that we know has influenced us positively and we keep talking about a lot is our sort of WhatsApp group, right? And the real way to sort of aid uh, being more rational is to have a group that agrees with you but also questions you, right? And holds you to account, because the problem is that by virtue of this self deception kicking in, right? Which is to say, let us say if you're thinking in bets and you're accepting that there is a risk element to it, you're saying that the decisions that favored your bets were actually based on skill, and anything that was outside of it was just luck, right? So, like New Zealand got lucky or India got unlucky, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. Is sort of my rationalization to say that
Correct.
my model was correct, just that this went outside the thing, right?
Yeah.
Which is where having a group of people who will actually hold you accountable and say, like, you guys basically say fuck off, like New Zealand have been excellent between, let's say, 2014 to 2024 or whatever that period is, and like providing counter stats to question your own these things becomes like extremely helpful, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think essentially this podcast is about us growing up more than us pontificating. No, I don't know how much of that has come across on this episode, but I think like that is another thing. Like if you can have a group like that, like nothing like it, right? So,
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
yeah,
For me, the purpose of this podcast was to
throwing
actually
it to you in the end zone as you are going to give us the final thought, apparently.
No, so my final thought really is ancillary to the topic that we've been discussing. Just a reaction to, I
Yeah.
think there has been news that the Indian SEBI or whatever, the authorities have basically come down and said they're not going to allow normal investors in India to invest in options, right? So option trading,
Oh,
you
okay.
need a license or something to be an option trader, and whereas
Really? Okay.
normal stock market, which I personally find is all just mumbo jumbo, right? Derivative trading at the end of the
Yeah.
day is no different from stock trading. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're taking a first order bet or a second order bet, it's a bet, right?
Correct.
And at
Yeah.
least my laissez-faire approach to life, the free market thinking is, you should let grown adults do whatever they want to, as long as the only people they're likely
Of
to harm
course.
is themselves, right? And I don't think the nanny
Of
state
course.
should be taking responsibility for them. So yeah, it was just one of
Yeah.
those things that irritates me when I see
Correct.
the government come and put out things like that. But I found it very strange. But yeah,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts? Shouldn't everyone be allowed
No,
to
I
think in
mean,
bets and to put their money where their mouth is, as you were saying?
no, 100%, right? And I think so. What ends up happening and why thinking in bets helps is that the other thing that you don't do is tell external people when you've sort of failed at a bet, right? So I speak about Meta. I may not talk about the multiple other stocks that I've invested in and lost money in,
Yeah,
just to like protect my self image. But your
GameStop.
PNL is always there, right?
Yeah,
Your PNL is always there and visible to you.
yeah,
And obviously, and of course, you should always be allowed to, like,
yeah,
as an adult, you probably should be able to, right? Except in cases where I don't know, man. Like, so for instance, hypothetically, if I were to bet on the IPL, which is not allowed, and I would never do it, but hypothetically, if I were allowed to bet on the IPL and it is on an evening where I've had a few drinks, then maybe my model has like gone on a tilt, right? And my estimation of the risk is not the same as it is otherwise, because
yeah,
obviously your reptile brain kicks in, your prefrontal cortex shuts down, your inhibitions are lowered, etc., etc. And then you also know that your decision quality has suffered, right? So in all other circumstances, maybe don't like do inebriated bets or whatever that is.
Yeah.
I think in this particular book, which is Thinking in Bets, Annie Duke actually uses the example of, I think it's Ulysses, right? So, do you know what is the logo of Starbucks?
Yo, we've spoken about the Starbucks logo before on this podcast. But yeah, it looks like the Statue of Liberty, but I don't know if that's what it is.
Oh
I'm not really.
no, it is from Greek mythology.
Is it Medusa
So
or
I
something?
thought you might say mermaid, but it's not a mermaid. It's a siren. Right? So
It's a siren,
sirens
okay.
are famous for like having songs that basically attract sailors to their
Yeah.
shores and then just crash and they die.
Which is the
And so
Ulysses story. Yeah.
point, the story was like he like got them
He
to
got them
fill
to
his
tie
urn
in.
with wax and tied it down. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. So other than those sort of tilt based bets, I believe like maybe you have to, if you're sort of going all in on thinking in bets, you also need to know what are the scenarios where you shouldn't be placing a bet, right?
Yeah.
Like especially if CSK is playing and Dhoni is batting, I probably shouldn't to make any bets because I'm likely to give odds that are completely skewed
Irrational.
from my
Yeah.
original form of thinking, right? So yeah, other than in those situations, obviously, man, like come on, like consenting fucking adults, like do what you want, like
Yeah.
be responsible for your own sort of outcome.
Yes, we are at a yes. And we thankfully have got a very nice peek into Tony's wonderful brain and why
Hey!
he thinks in bets.
How is
So
my brain?
that's what this episode was. This episode was basically us finding out about your way of thinking, which was fun. Yeah, I learned a lot today.
Yeah, no, so none of this is original at all, right?
I
It
didn't
is
say it was
highly
original.
derived, but
There are
also
only
like-
7 stories. Everybody repeats the same, so it's fine. It's okay. Learn out yours.
yeah, thank you. Rubbish. Okay, yeah, cool. I don't know how many of our listeners have stayed this far because this is yet another. Every time we hit a template, we change it up. No, I feel like this has been an episode that has been different from
The
most
last
of
few.
our recent ones.
I think we've been more naked in the recent episodes. They've been very
Correct.
very
Than this
sensitive.
one, yeah,
I would say
yeah.
sensitive
Yeah.
topics. Yeah, this one wasn't sensitive.
Yeah. No, but absolute gratitude to all our listeners, right? And I think the best thing about this podcast has been our listeners. And the fact that it's not just like, we like it or we don't like it. It's that a lot of people have actually responded with thoughts or taking it forward, etc., etc. Right? By a lot, I mean a handful. Like probably like 5 to 10 of our listeners, which is a lot for us, right? So
It is.
in that sense, it has been immensely rewarding to know that we've sparked some thought in some people, which has led to them exploring and getting back to us. So, lots of gratitude.
Yeah, thank you so much, listeners.
Yeah.
Yes.
And since this has been a podcast that's been different from the other ones, maybe we should try some, I don't know, subliminal messaging. We spoke of Lacto King and caramel, etc. But if I were allowed to carry a chocolate for my birthday, which would it be?
Melody.
No, it would be 5-star.
Ayo,
What
the perks of
luxury
being
hotels
able to
offer-
crack silly jokes.
what luxury hotels allow you the most amount of luxury?
5-star. 7-star.
5-star,
actually.
right?
7-star, technically.
Fuck off. 5-star. And
You have more.
we spoke of honey and apiaries and all that. So do you know what award is given to the best bee in a colony?
I don't know. They give awards to bees. What do they give? Gold medal.
They're given the Hive Star, right? And also, growing up, where did we watch a lot of our cricket on?
Doordarshan.
It was live on Star. So 5-star, 5-star, Hive Star, Live Star.
Maybe we are trying to
some
say
subliminal
something.
messaging is there for our listeners.
If you get it, please hit the bell icon. Yeah,
Oh my!
amazing. Well done. Well
This
done.
has been yet another completely different episode of Leftover Lasagna. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank you so
This
much.
is,
See you again.
Tony and Nitin
Yeah,
signing off.
Thank you so much. See you again
Bye,
in a week's
bye,
time.
bye.
Leftover Lasagne.
Leftover Lasagna.
Lasagna, no way.
It's a type of sandwich.
Some kind of gross pasta.
Leftover Lasagna is a
podcast
hosted by
my
Nitin
charge
and Tony Uncle. Leftover Lasagna.
Very funny name.